For this unit's presentation, we're taking off the training wheels and letting you sort of roam free. We're also trying to lighten the homework burden in a unit where we need to get through a lot of works. Basically, you're going to do some of each other's homework. For your assigned work, give us just the basic identifiers. Don't bother offering an extended analysis of our big four: content, function, context, and form. Instead, we want you to come up with your own big four. Tell us 4 things that intrigue you or even puzzle you about your work, the artist who created it, and or the era in which he or she was creating. If you can find information that's not in the textbook reading, and if you can focus in on some of the College Board's favorite themes, that would be great, but you get to choose what you find worth emphasizing. Your presentation should be 2 minutes max, and you should present your 4 observations conversationally. Don't just read from your slides. Know what you're going to say. For those of you who are going on to AP Capstone, this will be a very important element in your AP score. So I'm going to model this approach with a painting that isn't on the list. I'm not going to hold myself to the 2-minute rule, by the way. Who said life is fair? Since we haven't started racking up this unit's isms, let me briefly explain the term surrealism. We'll return to it. It's an artistic movement that was heavily influenced by the writings of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. Freud believed that we reveal truths about our psyche in dreams that liberate our unconscious. Jung took this a step further and argued that we have a kind of collective unconscious of shared memories, beliefs, fears, and hopes, and that these show up not only in dreams, but in literary and artistic archetypes. Our artist, Marc Chagall, grew up in the Jewish ghetto of Lithuania and later emigrated to Paris. His dreamscapes include the Bible stories and folk tales of his religious childhood and his own strange visions. Do you recognize the image on the left? It's the Fiddler on the Roof, a legendary figure who gave his name to the musical by that name. Interesting point number 1. This is Pope Francis's favorite painting. When Pope Francis made this statement to a reporter, a lot of people were shocked. This is not a Catholic work. The painter is Jewish. The Christ he portrays is Jewish. He is bearded, his head is covered, and his loincloth is actually a Jewish prayer shawl. When the painting was first unveiled, it shocked a lot of Jewish viewers as well. Weren't the Jews accused of encouraging the Crucifixion? Wasn't the cross a club used to attack Jews? Keep in mind that in 1938, Hitler had just taken his anti-Jewish rhetoric to a whole new level with Kristallnacht, or the Night of Breaking Glass, a night of brutal orchestrated attacks against German Jews. In fact, it was this event that inspired Chagall to paint the White Crucifixion. Political activists at the time also disliked the painting. Where were the good guys? Or that is, where were our good guys? On the left, we see communist soldiers storming a Jewish village, and on the right, we see Nazis desecrating a synagogue. Now, this doesn't seem as strange to us in the 21st century, where it's not hard to see both the Nazis and communists as oppressors. But in 1938, most intellectuals, and that meant most artists, thought one had to choose one or the other of these alleged saviors of Europe, and many artists were in fact proponents of communism. Let me share one Christian literature professor's thoughts about why the Pope loves this painting so much. This comes from an article from First Things magazine. He writes, quote, "I do not presume to put words into the mouth of the Bishop of Rome or to claim to have access to his thoughts. I do want to propose that his declared affection for Chagall's juxtaposition of the Jewish people as the suffering servant and Jesus as the crucified Redeemer suggests a deeper identification with the suffering of the Jews, which he perhaps includes in his contemplation of the cross. It also invites reflection on the time in which we live, in particular on the fate of those who are daily being martyred around the world. So, for example, ISIS terrorists beheaded and crucified Christians in Syria, Iraq, and Libya, and burned churches across the Middle East. 2. The painting juxtaposes Christian and Jewish iconography. No symbol is more iconic for Christians than the cross, and here it's shown bathed in light with figures that hover over Christ's suffering body the way angels in Christian paintings hover over Jesus or Mary or the saints. But in this painting, the fellows with the long white beards aren't archangels, they are rabbis. Or maybe the biblical patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the matriarch Rachel. We associate the candelabrum with Hanukkah, but this candelabrum has only 6 candles, not 8, and one of those candles is snuffed out, a traditional symbol of death. The figure in green may be the traditional figure of the wandering Jew. Remember that Chagall himself wandered from Russia to France to America, returning to Europe only after World War II. And the figure may be the prophet Elijah, or he may be both. In his autobiography, Chagall recalls celebrating the festival of Passover as a child, opening the door for Elijah as part of the traditional meal. He wondered if Elijah comes, quote, in the guise of a wretched old man, a hunchback beggar with a pack on his back and a stick in his hand. The latter recalls traditional paintings of the deposition of Christ, but it also recalls Jacob's ladder. One commentator I read noted that the arrangement here with smaller related episodes around a central figure recalls the icon paintings, which Chagall grew up surrounded by in Russia. Note how the viewer's eye is invited to circle around the perimeter of the picture, meditating on the scenes one by one. 3. This Jewish artist used Jewish and Christian scriptures to describe his artistic calling. Chagall was not a Christian. He was raised an Orthodox Hasidic Jew, and although he did not regularly attend synagogue, he did study the Torah, pictured here. He painted this work in exile when the Guggenheims arranged for his escape to America. It is certainly easy to understand how, in the midst of World War II, with millions of Jews being herded into concentration camps, that Chagall struggled to find enough meaning in life to paint. This is a poem he wrote to express his despair. And finally, point 4, Chagall tried to bring light to a troubled world. Chagall worked throughout most of the 20th century, and many of his most famous works were inspired by the Bible. In addition to paintings, he worked in stained glass. In fact, I think these are my favorite of his works, and here are a couple of examples. After World War II, he designed stained glass windows for bombed-out cathedrals, for the new United Nations headquarters in New York, and for a hospital in Jerusalem, the theme of which was the 12 tribes of Israel. In all of these, we see him united Jewish and Christian imagery in a plea for peace.